There are three categories of historical sources. There are primary sources, then there are secondary sources, and then finally there are tertiary sources. A primary source is an artifact, document, diary, manuscript, autobiography, recording, or any other source of information that was created at the time under study. It serves as an original source of information about the topic. A secondary source is a document or recording that relates or discusses information originally presented elsewhere. Secondary sources describe, discuss, interpret, comment upon, analyze, evaluate, summarize, and process primary sources. And this is pretty much the main task of the historian who publishes scholarly material, whether it be in the form of books or journal articles. This material is then peer-reviewed by fellow historians as a way to determine the work's overall reliability. And after the work is deemed reliable, it is finally published and deemed worthy of use as reference material by other historians. Tertiary sources are publications that summarize and digest the information in primary and secondary sources to provide background on a topic, idea, or event. Although tertiary sources are often credible, they're not typically attributed to a single author and don't provide the specialized knowledge expected of secondary and primary sources. How can you determine the reliability of a tertiary source? Let's use Wikipedia, for example. You can find information about almost any subject on there. Some articles might be reliable while others can be unreliable. The only way to know for sure is by looking at the references they provide. If you see a lot of brackets that say citation needed or no footnotes at all, then you are left not knowing whether or not what you've just read is credible. The source trail is key when it comes to discerning whether or not a tertiary source is reliable. And it doesn't end there. The quality of the source is just as important, if not more important. When you look at any bibliography, whether it be in a book, journal article, or website like Wikipedia, you will usually see a vast ocean of references, none of which the average person is willing to thumb through themselves. More often than not, when we refer to websites like Wikipedia for information, anyone who is untrained in whatever subject they're researching will usually put their blind trust in what they read and take it for granted simply because they see a footnote or endnote. But with sites like Wikipedia, anyone can submit information, which is why people should be extra cautious when reading anything on Wikipedia. This is a reason why most of us weren't allowed to cite Wikipedia as a source back when we were in school. Although we weren't allowed to cite Wikipedia, our professors did, however, let us use Wikipedia as a starting point for our research. But that was it. If we were going to use Wikipedia, we had to carefully thumb through certain sources, and the sources with scholarly backing were permitted to be used for our papers. Carefully scrutinizing sources is extremely important when referring to non-scholarly books and articles, because they, unlike scholarly approved books and articles, did not undergo the same academic scrutiny that all scholarly publishings went through. And it is for this reason that extra caution should be exercised by those who wade in the murky waters of the broader, more lenient constituents of tertiary sources. As for the historian, it should go without saying that yes, even historians are fallible and are also capable of making mistakes. But the reason why a historian's work is considered more reliable than the blog post of your average history buff is due to the sole fact that the historian has his or her feet held to the fire by their own peers who assess their work based on the merit of evidence that backs their claims and arguments. The history buff doesn't have their feet held to the same fire of evidence, and because they lack this corrective measure, they are susceptible to spreading more unchecked errors. All in all, the historian's scholarly work is carefully reviewed by other scholars, while the average untrained history buff tends to fly solo. The whole two heads are better than one concept comes to mind. When a historian is told of an error they made, they aren't expected to just take his fellow scholars' words for it. They will give evidence to back it up. And when the historian understands where he or she has been mistaken, the historian authoring the work will make the necessary corrections. And this is pretty much the value of scholarship in a nutshell. Many heads of similar interest and areas of focus come together to carefully thumb through each other's work to ensure that it is as accurate as possible. This is not to say that there aren't any limitations to this protocol, but having a careful and meticulous process is much better than having no process at all. Ultimately, the scholar provides us with their trail of sources, which is commendable. I'm not saying scholars are the only ones who do this, but anyone who does do this is at least trying to give their audience the ability to see how they came to their conclusions. The source trail is key, and it is one of the strengths of scholarship and academia that we don't really find anywhere else. By leaving us with the sources they used, scholars aren't telling us to simply trust them. Whether you just trust them or not is up to you. But scholars aren't preventing you from digging into the sources they've provided. They give us the ability to see for ourselves. That is, if we are willing to do the grueling deep dives into the sea of sources they provide us with. All in all, they're not telling us to just trust them like some low-grade tabloid. And with that said, thanks for watching.